John sighed as he clipped the leash onto Max's collar. The aging Labrador slowly rose to his feet, his joints creaking. John rubbed Max's head affectionately before leading him out the front door for their evening walk. The sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, bathing the suburban neighborhood in golden hour light. As they walked down the sidewalk, John nodded at a couple of neighbors watering their lawns. He used to know everyone on this street, but over the years, many familiar faces had moved away, replaced by young families John had not yet met. John missed the good old days when he and his wife would host lively dinner parties and Max was just a rambunctious puppy. But now he was divorced, his kids were grown, and poor old Max moved a lot slower these days. As they entered the park, John sighed again. He knew he was spiraling into depression, but he couldn't seem to pull himself out of the darkness. His mind constantly dwelled on the past, on failures and regrets. He wished he had spent more time with his family when it mattered, but it was too late now. Max sensed John's melancholy and nuzzled his hand. John managed a faint smile. "Good boy," he murmured. He threw a stick for Max, who lumbered after it dutifully. John winced as Max struggled to bend down far enough to pick the stick up in his mouth. Getting old was no fun. As they ventured deeper into the park, the trees grew thicker, blanketing the trail in shadow. John shivered despite the warmth of the evening. He felt irrationally uneasy, like he was being watched. Glancing around, he saw no one. Still, he couldn't shake the ominous atmosphere that had settled over him. Rounding a bend, John froze. Carved into a tree trunk were strange symbols he did not recognize. They looked almost occult in nature. John tore his gaze away, his pulse quickening. "Don't be ridiculous," he told himself. "Just some kids messing around." But his unease remained coiled in his gut, like a snake ready to strike. That night, John had difficulty falling asleep. He lay rigid in bed, straining his ears for any odd sounds, but the house was silent. Finally, exhaustion overtook him, pulling him down into restless slumber. His dreams were filled with disturbing whispers in a language he could not understand. Shadowy figures pursued him through the park trails at a preternaturally fast speed. No matter how hard he ran, they grew ever closer. He woke just before they caught him, heart pounding and soaked in sweat. Over the next few days, John could not shake a pervasive sense of dread. Strange things started happening around the house. Max began acting peculiar, often growling at nothing John could see. At night, John would hear creaking floorboards and scratching on the walls when he knew Max was asleep beside him. He started noticing odd smells, rotten eggs and meat gone bad. But when he searched for the source, he found nothing. The whispers returned as soon as John managed to fall asleep, more insistent now. And still those symbols haunted his mind, though he avoided the park, unwilling to confirm if they were really there or not. John decided these were symptoms of declining mental health. He booked an appointment with his doctor, but after a standard exam, she concluded it was just age catching up with him. John's friends were sympathetic, but similarly dismissed his experiences as an overactive imagination. John's desperation grew. He knew in his bones something sinister was targeting him, but no one believed him. One night, John awoke with a scream, his nightmare ending abruptly as a clawed hand reached for his face. Max was snarling viciously at the open closet door, but when John leapt up to search inside, nothing was there. John paced his home, every nerve on high alert. "That's it," he told Max firmly. "We are settling this tonight." Against his better judgment, he hooked the leash to Max's collar and headed for the park as the sun set. At least whatever was haunting him only seemed to come out at night. The park was empty and eerily still when John arrived. The trees loomed oppressively overhead, shadowing the trail in a way that seemed unnatural. John hesitated, doubting his plan, but the symbols called to him from somewhere up ahead. Heart pounding, he continued onward, Max pacing at his side. The symbols were there, just as John feared, but as he leaned in to examine them, a wave of nausea and dizziness hit him hard. His surroundings swayed sickeningly. John blinked, trying to steady himself. What was happening? When his vision cleared, Max was gone. "Max!" John shouted hoarsely, whipping his head around. How could the old dog have slipped his leash so quickly? Unease prickled at John's spine. He peered into the woods, straining for any sign of movement. Was that a shadow darting between the trees? John stumbled backward, suddenly certain something evil was toying with him. Fumbling for his phone, John cried out in dismay. No signal. The park had always had good reception before. Sweat beaded on John's brow as he glanced wildly around. He was completely isolated, cut off from the help. What the hell had he been thinking coming here alone at night? A dry, sinister chuckle echoed through the trees, making John jump. Leaves crunched behind him and he whipped around, but nothing was there. The chuckle came again from a different direction. John's breathing quickened to panicked gasps. He turned and fled down the trail, branches whipping against him, roots threatening to trip him as the demonic laughter pursued him relentlessly. John ran until a heart attack felt imminent. He bent over wheezing and he finally stopped. No more laughter rang out, only the frantic pounding of blood in his ears. But when he straightened up, he saw something that made his heart stutter. Glowing red eyes peered out from the dense trees. They blinked slowly, amused, relishing John's terror. Paralyzed, John watched the shadowy figure melt into the woods once more. This was no hallucination or bad dream. Something evil truly did haunt these woods, and it had taken Max. John's terror morphed into rage. That was his dog, his only real friend left. He had to rescue Max from this hellish entity. John picked up a thick, knobby branch, gripping it like a baseball bat. "Come out here and face me, you bastard," he shouted into the woods. His only reply was an unearthly howl that chilled him to his very soul. The red eyes reappeared, regarding John with interest. A large black shape slid from between the trees, circling John. He turned slowly, branch raised, as the thing toyed with him. It remained obscured in shadow, only its eyes visible. Eyes. "Give me back my dog and go back to whatever hell you crawled out of," John shouted desperately. The answering rumble sounded almost amused. John leapt forward, swinging the branch with all his strength. It passed right through the shadowy figure, as if through smoke, throwing John off balance. Laughter echoed around him as he scrambled to his feet. "Max!" John screamed hoarsely. "Max! Boy! Come here!" At John's feet, the shadows coalesced into a cowering, whimpering shape. John dropped to his knees. "Oh, Max, there you are. Good boy, it'll be okay." He reached out a trembling hand to pat the dog. Max's form bubbled and warped under John's hand. Muscles and bones distended grotesquely, a beastly snout lengthening from his face. Sharp claws tore through Max's gentle paws. John recoiled in horror as Max lifted his head, revealing the glowing red ears of the demon. It opened its gruesome mouth, releasing an unearthly shriek. John turned to run, but claws sliced through his calf like butter. He crumpled, crying out in agony. The creature loomed over him, snarling, claws dripping with John's blood. "Max, please!" John whimpered, crawling backward frantically as the demon stalked after him. It made a guttural noise, almost like a mocking laugh. "You were so lonely, so desperate for a companion," the thing rasped in a gravelly approximation of Max's voice. "It made it so very easy." John's back hit a tree trunk. He screamed as the demon lunged, ripping into his throat with its teeth. The monster tore him apart slowly, savoring each shredded limb, listening eagerly to every wretched scream. Finally, John's ravaged body lay in tattered, gore-soaked pieces, scattered around the once peaceful trail. The demon licked John's blood from its claws with satisfaction. It had chosen its newest victim well. The man's despair and isolation had left his soul vulnerable for the taking. Now free from the prison of Max's stolen body, the demon melted back into the shadows of the cursed park to resume the hunt. It would bide its time, allowing fear and myth to spread. Soon it would select the perfect new target from among the curious and the reckless. As life faded, John hoped beyond hope that somehow, somewhere, the dear soul of his beloved Max still remained intact.